All right. Whoa, that's really loud. A little bit better. Perfect. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Benjamin Johnson, and I'm the event coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatchewan. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory, which is the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. As we listen to our speakers share their words today, may we recognize the Indigenous stories that have been shared on this land since time immemorial. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Auroras, Afterwards, and Other Stories by Julio Torres-Recinos. Joining us tonight as hosts is Jeannette Lynes, as well as live music provided by Manrique Torres-Pais. Thank you so much to Julio, Jeannette, and Manrique for being here this evening and for working with us to make this event happen. Just to note that this event is being live streamed, so please be aware of the webcam to your right. I'd also like to take this time to encourage you to silence your phones for the duration of the event. If you would like to buy copies of Auroras, Afterwards, and Other Stories, as well as some other books by both Jeannette and Julio, we have some up on the signing table behind me, as well as on the desk by where you first walked in. You're welcome to get your book signed before you purchase it. Just please remember to stop by the cash desk on the way out. We are trying to run a business. Julio Torres-Recinos writes poetry and short stories. He's published several books of poetry and a book of short stories. He's given poetry recitals in many countries, such as Spain, Germany, Italy, the United States, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Australia. In 1992, he won the first poetry prize in a competition organized by the Spanish Cultural Celebration in Toronto, Ontario, and has been finalist in several literary competitions. He is professor of Spanish at the University of Saskatchewan. Jeannette Lynes is the author of 4 novels and 7 books of poetry. Her most recent novel is The Paper Birds, published by HarperCollins Canada. Her nonfiction book, Apron Apocalypse, Lyric Essays, is forthcoming in 2026. She directs the MFA on Writing at the University of Saskatchewan. Everyone, please give them a warm welcome. You got that agreed, my dog?
Yes. Buenas noches, good evening. Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank first McNally Robinson and Benjamin, Jasper for organizing this. I'd like to also thank Jeannette Lynes for making the time for being here, and also I'd like to thank you for coming out and being here. Welcome. And I'd like to thank David Rosotto, the translator. He translated the short stories. He did an excellent job. It's not easy. Thousands of words, and it's difficult to do that, but he did it, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, Manrique, my son, he's gonna perform a few songs. Please, Manrique.
In the back here, that? I didn't think I'd be starting this. Okay, this is not the way I thought it was going to go. Yeah, these are just. Can I turn this mic off?
Yeah, I can turn it up.
Yeah, these are just arrangements, basically. The first is they're all based on rock music. The first is by Steve Hackett of Genesis. The second is from James Dean Bradfield of the Manchester Preachers, and the third is by Mark Kozlek, and they're just acoustic arrangements. I don't play classical, I played electric, so these are like adapted for my style of playing, and that is a lot to say about that. Thank you for coming out, everybody.
Muchas gracias, Manrique. Gracias. Yeah. A little bit about the stories and the book I'm presenting here. The first edition was published in Spain in 2013. I went to Spain, I went to Madrid and presented the book there. Actually, I presented 3 books there, but I didn't present it here because books are heavy, carry them from Spain, and like just back then it was possible to bring lots of books. That was okay, not unlike today, okay, that it's so difficult. The airlines, they give you a hard time. Okay, so then, but I wanted to publish a Canadian edition, which was published in 2017. And this is the one that from 2017. I never presented this book here just for one simple reason. That year I published 3 books and I presented 2 here. Okay, so not this one. And but finally, now that the translation is out, finally, yes, I'm able to present the 2 books. And of course, you have the option. If you think your Spanish is good enough, be my guests, okay? And but if you want to get the 2 of them, then you can get the Spanish version, and then if you don't know a word, you can check the English version. Okay, that's the idea, and it's good for business, okay? Because you know what? It's better for me if you buy the 2 books than just one. Okay? Yeah. Okay. I've been writing short stories for a long time. The partners are not very good at it, okay? That's the reality, okay? I've written like 16 books of poetry, but only 2 books of short stories. The short stories, for me, they take longer, so then and I just don't have the time. And I do admire people who write short stories and novels, right, Jeannette? Yes, Jeannette, yeah, sorry. But I've been writing short stories. The first one here, Momo, that was written back in probably 1986. And the thing is this, is that short stories, they allow you to express things that you cannot express in poetry. Yeah. So then, and I'm still writing short stories. I'm still writing, and I'll be publishing the next one very soon. I'm gonna read a couple of pages from a short story called Tristan, and it's one of my favorite stories. It has been reproduced many times, and I like it because it can be read in many levels, and it has many elements that I like. Tristan. When Tristan arrived at Miss Lola de Pong's house, he had just turned 16. It was the month of August, and some relatives had sent him from Los Angeles after his mother died. Thieves have mobbed her. They pulled her purse from a motorcycle, and she slipped and hit her head on the sidewalk edge. She was taken to the hospital. The doctors did what they could, but she never regained consciousness. And a week later, she passed away. Dollars that would not last long. Tristan's mother and Miss Lola de Pons, a 47-year-old widow, had been like sisters when they were young. And for lack of a better option, it was natural that the boy should return to San Salvador to live with Auntie Lola. That tall boy was with the straight hair arrived at the big, dark house along with his clothes, his ever-present Walkman, a huge black ghetto blaster, and $3,000 in his pocket, the sole inheritance from his mother. It was never known who his father was, and his relatives had never been interested in the boy of that poor relative who eked out her living as an assistant to the gringo teachers at the nursery school. Miss Lola greeted the boy with pomp and circumstance. She prepared him a room at the back of the house and bought him a desk, books, and some clothes. She told him that this was his home, and soon she would send him to school so that he could become someone in the future. She would do as much as she could for the son of Finita, who was like my sister. We shared the same blood, poor darling. The skinny boy didn't say anything and stared at the myrtle shrubs that neatly stood in the middle of the patio, surrounded by the rooms and living spaces of the house. February came. The streets were full of life, with hundreds of children wearing blue pants or skirts and white shirts, jumping and pushing each other on their way to school. Tristan and Miss Lola Tristan asked Miss Lola about the school she was going to send him to because she had not mentioned it again. The lady smiled a little at the beginning and told him that she had been thinking about it. It was better to wait a little while because she wasn't sure it was a good idea that he returned to school after the shock of his mother's death. Another serious problem, she added, showing her big golden teeth, was that Tristan's Spanish wasn't good enough to succeed in school. She wanted to act responsibly. Tristan had the urge to protest, but he thought the lady's reasons were not so crazy. Besides, the idea of doing nothing the whole day suited him just fine. The placidity of lying idle didn't last long because Miss Lola told him that he should help him at home, and she didn't have time to take care of the housework, and maids wanted to earn a lot of money, hardly worked, and many times even their children had to be fed. Tristan found himself sweeping and waxing the red tile floors, which later he had to polish. A year after arriving to that big house, Tristan didn't have a penny left because Miss Lola had told him that she needed the money, that he should loan it to her, that he shouldn't worry because she should pay him in a short time. First, she asked for 500, then 1,500, and then another 500 until the day he gave her the last dollars he had left. That year in the tropics had suited Tristan very well, as did the exercise of polishing floors, how fine Finira's son looked, especially with when his shirt was open because of the heat. One evening, it was during the Civil War times, there was a blackout and the house turned dark. Miss Lola took a lamp, looked for candles and matches, and went to Tristan's bedroom. It was 9 in the evening. Explosions and shots could be heard at a distance. A truck passing by was bouncing on the road stones and made the house tremble. Tristan was listening to music on his Walkman when he saw a light was approaching. It was Miss Lola, who sat on his bed, spoke with an agitated voice about the electricity, the situation, and began rubbing Tristan's naked leg with her hand. Then she took him by the shoulders, offered him her perfume body, and turned the lamp off. The next day, Tristan saw her walking around the myrtles, caressing some green lemons that were almost touching the ground. And if you know what happened next you have to buy the book, okay? Gracias. Yeah, okay. Now it's Jeanette's turn to ask me questions. Thank you very much for doing this, Jeanette, and I hope you're gonna be nice, okay? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Julio, for the reading, and Enrique for the beautiful music. And thank you all for coming. Julio, thank you for this collection. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I had to confront my own just ignorance about, well, history, and particularly the politics of the global South. I'm just, kind of your typical Canadian who has a kind of narrow scope, I suppose. So I looked into things a little bit more, and I learned quite a lot. So thank you for this collection. I'm going to start. These are going to sound like really English professory questions. I don't know if that means they're difficult or not.
No, that's okay, Jeanette. Nobody's perfect. That's okay.
I'm just getting used to the fact that you exist outside of the fourth floor of the Arts Tower. Okay. All right, so I'm going to build off, Julio, something that you already spoke about a little bit. I know you mainly as a poet, and I've heard you read from your poetry collections. I would love to hear you speak about how, to what extent does your poetry craft migrate over into these stories? If that makes sense as a question, like, does it feel very writing very separate things to you, or do you draw on your skill with your metaphors and imagery? And so, yeah, how does your writing your life as a poet inform your life as a storyteller, fiction writer?
That's a very good question, Jeannette. I think sometimes having that training of writing poetry, it helps. And sometimes especially in some short stories, I can see that influence. The images, the metaphors, the prose, I can see it. And in fact, I promised David Rosotto, and I told Manrique, my son, as well, that I was gonna read a short story that is called Momo, which is the first story I ever wrote. But it's Momo. It's like poetry, and it's very emotional. And when I was practicing yesterday, I said, forget it. I'm not gonna do it, okay? And I decided to choose a different one because I think that story is almost like poetry, and in the sense that the emotions and the expression and all that stuff is way too heavy. Forget it. But on the other hand, with with other short stories, that's a different game completely, in the sense that I don't think writing poetry and all the experience helps me at all. Because then there is more like the situation and the action and the characters and how you develop the story. I don't know. No, I don't. But I could ask you the same question. What do you think? Because you're an excellent poet, and also you have written many novels as well. What do you think?
I more and more see these elements of craft as just being like little floating particles that can migrate across genres, and they're like a toolbox that you can just cherry pick from. Oh, I need to describe this tree. Maybe I'll use a simile, and it all kind of starts to flow a little bit, I think, after a while. I know the one story you're referring to, Julio, I think that's the one that I thought, oh, this story is you can really read it as a prose poem, but it was beautifully written in that way, had that compression. Okay, so I'm going to shift.
What story is that? You remember?
The one that you were just speaking about.
Okay. You see it? Exactly. Yeah.
She already remembered the title. No, I don't want to get the wrong title. So I tried to skate around that one. So, but I am going to switch a little bit and ask you about your characters. I mean, these are really compelling. They're really character-driven stories. Very, very character-driven, and I love fiction that's character-driven. Can you hear me okay at the back there, Peggy? All right, good. I usually check. Thank you. Right. So many of your stories portray characters whose lives are in disarray. There's family members have gone missing. There's a lot of violence. There's crime. There's a lot of fear. There's chaos around these characters. A lot of the characters have really fragmented lives and relationship split ups, and some of the characters seem lost or adrift, and some are searching for a community or to find a new home. And I'm no different than anybody else. We always kind of secretly wonder, where do you get your characters from? Are these composites of people you've known, or the aspects of yourself? So it's always this kind of weird thing I have anyway. I wonder where they got their characters from. Do you want to speak about that?
Not really.
Okay, next question.
No, it's not that really. No, it's a good question. The thing is this, there is a, there is a, there is a short story that is called the way of the night, the way of the night. And this is a short story. It's an example where in this case, it's about a person I knew, and sometimes if I know a person or if I hear a story, then that's the seed that I take to make the story. In this case, it was a gentleman that I met in Toronto. When I was a student at York University, so then I was staying I rented a room, and then he was also renting a room in the same house, and then yeah, so his story basically it was a sad story. I don't know what had happened to him in El Salvador. I don't know if he was from El Salvador or Honduras, but he just couldn't find peace in himself or in life, and he was married to a nice lady, a Canadian lady, but he just wasn't happy. His in-laws, they love him, but he just that nothing was. The city was not good. The marriage was not for him. Nothing was good for him. So then that story, it has that element of reality. And there are other stories as well. The story that gives a title to the book, Aurora, Afterwards, that is also, it has some the elements were taken from reality, really, as well. But not all of them, okay? Some of them are just fiction. Some of them are just fiction. And in the case of Tristan, that story, the story actually is from a novel by a great Spanish writer. He's a novelist. His name is Benito Pérez Galdós. He wrote in the 19th and 20th century, and he wrote so many novels, and he was the best. He was from the Canary Islands, and he should have been awarded the Nobel Prize. He was that good. That novel is called Tristana, feminine name, but my character is called Tristan. So then it's the story. I work with the story, but with lots of changes. Okay, so then it's the novel, but also the movie. There is a movie based on the novel, and the movie is by Luis Buñuel, the very famous Spanish film director, extremely famous, and he lived in Mexico. And Catherine Deneuve, the French actress, is the main character who plays Tristana. So basically, with that story by Galdós and by Buñuel, but of course now I bring him to El Salvador, and instead of being a woman, it's a guy. Like all that kind of stuff. Okay.
That's very interesting. Thank you. More questions about character. In fiction, it's often said that a character in a story needs to be dynamic and needs to change. And your characters, they they meet each other in weird, interesting, random ways, like two characters meet on a bus or something like that, you know, and there's a lot of movement through space, like a lot of buses and cars and I think there's trains and a few airplanes. So for character, some of your characters seem to learn really painful lessons about life, or about themselves. I was thinking the protagonist of The Weight of the Night is a very restless, rootless character. It seemed like he suffers from trauma and PTSD from all the violence and the terrible things that have happened to him. Limelight is about a man's vanity and ego, if I read that the right way. A little bit of a satirical kind of a wink happening in there. And he seems really diminished at the end, though. Like the universe has, you know, given him a kick in the butt for having such a big fat ego. So it seemed like some characters do learn some very painful lessons, but I guess you're not setting out to tell a kind of moral or anything at the end, I wouldn't think, right?
No, what I was depending on, because there's 16 stories, and of course it's very difficult to generalize, but sometimes I don't like my characters, okay? And I treat them really bad, but I'm not a bad parent. They don't deserve it, you know what I mean? But the problem is this: sometimes people, they don't learn any lessons in life, okay? And that's what I'm trying to show in the stories as well. You know, like, and some of these guys, some of my characters, they're really bad. Oh boy, they're bad guys, you know? So then, what do they expect from life? Not very good things, okay? I'm sorry, but you know, yeah.
I did write in the margin more than once something like another absentee father. I mean, yes, some of the characters do some not very good things. I want to ask you, Julio, about like the endings of your stories. Aurora afterwards feels quite open-ended, which I know really in a good way. How do you think about endings in short stories? I quite liked how you navigated that.
Uh, yeah, that's a good question. Jeannette, the thing is this: when I went to the university and I studied philology, philology is the study of language and literature and all that stuff, literary theories. I remember a very famous professor in Costa Rica, and he would tell us about the the Latin American short story and how the Latin American short story had achieved a master of craftsmanship. Okay, and great authors. The most famous one, Juan Rulfo from Mexico, Borges from Argentina, Alejo Carpentier from Cuba, Garcia Marquez from Colombia. These are big names. And these guys, and of course, Julio Cortázar from Argentina as well. And these guys, they had their stories, every word counted. There was no room for anything that wasn't related to the story. And then there was always an unexpected ending. They had to close like that, no open endings or stuff like that. Okay, so then in a way I was trying to do that, but I don't know if that's the right approach. Okay, because then I've been reading other famous and extremely good Latin American authors who don't do that, and then I said, wait a second, why are you doing this? You know, but I guess authors, they have the freedom to do what they please, you know.
Okay, this is a really English professory question, this next one. I really admired the range of styles in these stories. Some stories are quite short, others are longer. Oh, Momo is the one that I read almost like as a prose poem. It is Momo. Some stories are almost leaning into being kind of monologues or extended monologues. One story is made of very long clauses that just keep piling onto each other. That was really cool. That was like a train wreck of subordinate clauses. I love that. And so what choices inform the style in these stories that a story will take? Or does that just happen organically once you've begun writing? Like how intentional is that? Those choices? I imagine they are, I mean, for writers.
I, I guess that happens somehow you start developing a story, and then somehow you find an organic way of telling that story that would work for that story, but not for other stories. It's writing stories. It's hard for me, but once I have an idea of where I'm heading, then it becomes easier. Yeah, but it's not that easy.
Thank you. When I said a train wreck of subordinate clauses, I meant that was a compliment. I meant that in a good way. And it's almost time for audience questions, but I do want to ask you a couple more things. What's it like having your work translated? Like you showed us the Spanish editions, and now they have this English edition, or what was it like working with that translator? I think that would be really, as someone who hasn't really had that experience, what is that like having your stories in more than one language?
The translation was done by David Rosoto, as I said before. It was an interesting it was an interesting experience seeing your stories now somehow independent, and now they're there, you wrote them, but now there is another person now putting them into English. Um, the, it was, in a way, you require like some distance in order to appreciate what the translator has done. What I had to do with the translation was just because I knew the story. Just I wanted to make sure that the translation was faithful to the original. Basically, that was it. And then the other thing with the Spanish is this: is that sometimes a word that is used in a particular country is used in a different country, but the meaning has changed. So that it happened a couple of times, and then I had to explain to David, no, because you're changing the meaning. No, in El Salvador, that word means this, and of course he didn't know, and he was very gracious about that. But it was an interesting process, yeah.
Thank you. And it's almost time for audience to ask questions, but I can't resist. Julio, do you have a favorite story?
You're bad, okay? Do I a favorite story? I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. No. But I do have like 3 or 4 that I really like. Of course, Momo is one of them, and Tristan is another one, and the last one. Okay, the last one, a version of Octavia. That's one of my favorites as well. Yeah.
I really like the story too about the guy who became obsessed with cars, and there was all this like toxic materialism. It's like he was pursuing this idea of the American dream was to have a certain car, and that almost read like a moral fable of the perils of materialism. That was very cool. Thank you again for this collection. I really enjoyed reading this during the break last week, Julio. Thank you. And this is when we, folks in the audience get to ask questions, and I will, I think, give over the microphone.
And thank you very much, Jeannette, for those wonderful questions.
I have more.
All right, we got a big crowd in here tonight. Does anybody have any questions for Julio? Be brave.
So this is your first adventure into translation to English. So are you considering the idea of translating other of your works? For example, poetry and having a bilingual edition, or would you think that would be too difficult to be true to your thoughts?
Thank you, Donna. That's a good question. In fact, one of my books, and I presented that here in 2017, The Faces of Fear, that's a bilingual edition, and David Rosotto translated that book as well. But I think it's, something, I think for someone who writes in Spanish in an English or French speaking world, for my colleagues in Montreal and Quebec, it makes sense to publish a bilingual edition, if possible. The only thing is that it takes doing the translation, it takes time, but I think it's a wonderful idea. And in fact, when you see, for example, some of the books of poetry by Spanish or Mexican or Chilean or Argentinian poets, it's a bilingual edition, and now I understand why. Now, my next collection of short stories, and I'm trying to convince David Rosotto, and I told him, look, this time I think I would like to have the book translated. It's going to be a bilingual edition. The only problem is that they can be a little bit too thick. If a book, only the Spanish version is this, well, the English is going to be double, okay, with the English translation. But I think that's going to be it's going to be easier. You just publish one, and I'm going to see if I can do the same thing with my books of poetry as well, to translate them into English. Yeah.
Any other questions? Perfect.
Julio, how do you write? I mean, do you have like a situation or factors that inspire you? Like, do you write in the night, or do you have to feel something, or maybe what makes you write, or start with an idea of let's say a short story of a poem?
Good question, Enrique. The ideas, they can come from everywhere. Sometimes I remember many of the ideas, they come when I go for walks. I go for walks, nothing to do, and then suddenly I start thinking about something, and then I go home and write a couple of lines, 3 lines, and then the next day I go back to the same idea, okay? Or like right now I'm writing a short story. I started that 3-4 days ago, and then and I've been thinking about that. I think I'm going crazy, okay? Yeah, but that's one way of developing ideas. But then sometimes sometimes, like in my last book of poetry, and I was telling some friends that then I said, okay, because I went in last month in July, I went to Calgary to a conference, and then we had an extra day there with a couple of friends, one from Toronto and the other one is from Colombia. We decided to rent a car, and then we went to Canmore for the day. We drove to Canmore, and then they went for a hike. I stayed at a nice restaurant. Okay, I don't like bears. Okay, I said you go and deal with them. Okay, okay, no, okay. Um, and then at around 5, we were walking, and the mountains were so beautiful and all that. And then I decided to take some pictures. And I took like 15 pictures. I never take pictures. And then I said, when I was at the office at the university, and then I said, I think I'm gonna write a poem about the mountains, Canmore. And then I wrote a poem. And then I remember that I had the pictures. Then I went to the phone, and I started viewing the pictures. I wrote one more, and one more, and one more, 5 poems. Yeah, 5 poems. I mean, like, and sometimes, it's just that basically I have reached a point where I can write a poem about anything. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Yeah, but good question. Enrique. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Hola, profe, ¿qué tal?
Hola, bien, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, gracias.
I'm curious if you have like unfinished like poetry or stories, or like if there's ones that you just lost interested in, or ones that you don't want to continue writing on. Has that ever happened to when you write?
I thought you were going to ask the question in Spanish. There's some former students here. Chantel is here. Chelsea, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some and also some members of the Hispanic community and the community, the university, some colleagues here. Thank you for being here. That's a good question, Chelsea. The thing is this: writing is a craft, and I guess you just become better the more you write. I've written 16 books of poetry. I have 3 that I haven't published yet. But in the past, good question, because in the past, I would start a poem, 2 lines, and sometimes that was it, 2 lines, and I can show you. I still have the notebooks. Okay, 2 lines. There was no way, but that happened, and sometimes I would go back again, and then sometimes I would be able to write a poem, but sometimes there was no way. So then they're still there, and the same thing happened with in the past with short stories. I would start a short story, and then I would stop writing just because that was it. I couldn't keep writing. Yeah, so it happened. Yeah, it happens, but not anymore. Okay, not anymore. Oh yes, not anymore now. It's just in a way. I guess if you keep thinking about that, and then the words will come. Okay, but it comes with practice. Yeah. But it's a good question. Guess what? I was thinking, I should go back again to those notebooks. Because there is some stuff there that I'm sure that I can rescue those lines, and they would be grateful, you know, because I'm not that bad parent, right? Okay, right? Good question, Chelsea.
I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? Got one?
Eudoxio, yeah, the mic is coming, Eudoxio.
I understood in you speaking that you do not like some of the characters. Do you create a reason to dislike them? How is it you or you find out that the person you create is not good at the end of writing the story?
The thing is this, literature is full of bad people, right? That's the reality. Exactly. Good people are not interesting, okay? That's the reality. Boring. That's what a friend of mine would say. Boring. Yeah. But if you're mean, if you're an awful person, you're interesting. I can write about you. Yeah, of course. The thing that's it. You know, like I, you know, I know so many bad people. I know so many bad people, and you know what? And of course, I'm gonna change names, you know. But I'm gonna have fun because those stories are great.
Does it mean that you impersonate your character before writing?
Of course, you have to do that. But that's the reality. You know, but the literature and the movies are full of bad characters. Bad characters. Oh yes, big time. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. And the world is full of bad characters. Okay.
So you don't mean saying that you are a bad character when you write the story.
Uh, I wouldn't put it that way, okay? I wouldn't put it that way, okay? It's like I'm more like an actor, okay? More like an actor, okay? And I can distance myself from the characters, okay? Yeah, yeah. Like a good actor, yeah. Thank you very much, Alex.
All right, so that pretty much brings us to the end of our time, but I wanted to once again thank you so much, Julio. Thank you, Jeannette, and thank you, Enrique, for all of your work and for putting this event on. If you guys would like to get a book signed, Julio will be up at the table, and yeah, thank you very much. Can we give them a round of applause?
Thank you for coming out, okay?